Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. And tonight we'll talk about one of the least favorite subjects I think anyone wants to hear about. Not death, we're talking about taxes. So tonight we're going to talk about real estate taxes with two specialists, real estate tax attorneys. We're going to talk with Leonard Amare and Katherine Odell, both from the firm Amare and Locallo. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let's start this subject, the one that no one wants to talk about, but everyone really needs to know something about. With the actual process, tax bills are going out now. People are seeing them. They're all shocked. They never want to pay it. They wonder, how does this get to be my bill? So, Katherine, can you start it how does this process start? Where does that bill originate?
The bill really originates from the assessment that the Cook County assessor puts onto the property.
And the assessment is, what is that process? How does
It's a
that happen?
percentage of what the assessor believes the market value of the property should be.
So they come out and say, your house is worth $350,000.
That's right.
And I'm going to take whatever it is, 10% of that, and that's your assessed value, right?
Exactly.
Kevin, if what you said was accurate, there would be a lot less dissatisfaction with the tax bill. If the assessor actually came out and looked at your house and said this is what it was worth, it'd be easy. Of the 102 counties in the state, 101 actually do that. In Cook County, because we have 2 million parcels of real estate in Cook County, we don't have an actual hands-on assessment. It's based upon a regression analysis, and because it being a regression analysis,
Which is a form of statistical analysis, right?
Yeah, it's not accurate because they're doing it on a broad basis, and that causes the unevenness of the tax bills, which is why people are so happy. I think you first have to tell them about when people are unhappy. They're unhappy not because of the present situation, but because of something that happened last year.
Yeah, I mean, the city was reassessed in 2012. So that's when the properties will increase. So of an increase in the assessment due to the reassessment. City's 2012 triennial, we're on a triennial basis.
Triennial means every 3 years we're going to be reassessed, right?
So 2012, the assessor sent out notices to everyone in the city letting them know this is what your new assessment is going to be. Some of the homeowners actually had a decrease in their assessment because of the market conditions. Other areas in the city had increases in the assessment. Whether it decreased or increased, the homeowner had the rights, property owner had the right to file an appeal within a 30-day period once they received that notice.
Well, before we even get to appeals, it's true, tell me if it is true, that your assessment can change, but your taxes either won't change or your assessment may go down, your taxes may go up, your assessment may go up, your taxes could go down, because there is a relationship, but it's not a direct correlation, right?
Right, because the equation is assessment times the tax rate gives you what your actual tax amount is, which is what people are seeing on their tax bills right now.
And the tax rate, does the tax rate vary? I know that there are, if you ever read, for the few people like me who actually read the tax bill, you see that there are all these taxing bodies throughout, and just even I live in Proviso Township, so even in Proviso, you know, we've got the high school district, the grammar school district, we've got the library district, we've got the park district, we've got the villages. There's a bunch of taxing bodies that are trying to get a piece of my real estate tax dollars, right? So do they all set their own rates? How does that happen?
Well, each neighborhood, area, location sets its own tax rate. How much money do they need? There's only a certain percentage they can actually go up as far as the tax rate is concerned.
And that's fixed by law, right?
Right, it's fixed by law. But usually it will increase from one year to the next depending upon how much money your local school district, your neighborhood needs. So if you were to look at the entire Cook County, all the townships together, every tax rate is different. The city usually has one general tax rate.
The city of Chicago.
The city of Chicago. But each neighborhood might have a little bit of an increase, so the city will have a base tax rate, but the neighborhood down the street may have a little bit of a higher tax rate because that local school district might need more money for whatever reason.
And the schools determine that, right? In fact, sitting on my own school board, I happen to know that the schools figure out how much money they need, and they send that levy to the Cook County clerk who says, well, okay, here's what we need to collect.
The thing that drives our clients crazy, the homeowners, is my taxes went up, but the value of my property went down. And we'll review the assessment at the Cook County Assessor's Office, Joe Barrios, and in fact, Joe Barrios will have lowered the assessment.
Right.
But the tax bill went up because the taxing districts want more money. Kevin, I think it's important for the viewer, the homeowner who's watching this show, or any property owner who's watching this show, to know that the assessing officials have just one function. I don't care whether it's in Cleveland, Ohio, or Palermo, Sicily. The assessors have but one function. His or her function is to place a value on that property that the property would sell for, in that person's opinion, at an arm's length sale in the marketplace. That's all the assessors do. Once you get by all of the other mechanics, the taxing districts, the equalizer, which we don't want to talk about, that complicated bottom line is where the taxes come out. But they blame the assessor, they blame the real estate tax lawyers. It's really not our problem. It's really not our fault that the taxes are going up. The values are what they are, what it would sell for in the arm's length sale in the marketplace. I'll give you an example. If you buy a house and pay $500,000, that's what the assessor should put in as your value. And if he has you assessed at $600,000, you just show him that you got the sale for $500,000, and he'll give you a value in the assessor's office of $500,000. But then you start going on with the equalizer, that boogeyman, then you start going on with the taxing districts. And homeowners, by the end of the day, they're saying, you know, it's so complicated, and then they hate the lawyers, and then they hate the assessors, and you can't blame them. Nobody likes taxes or death, as you said, Kevin.
Right.
But if you're not aggressive to keep that assessment as low as possible, because of the higher tax rate from year to year, you're going to continually pay more unless you go out and you file your appeals or hire legal counsel to do it for you.
So that's a great segue. Let's talk about what you guys do. So if I am a homeowner and I look at it and think, good Lord, you know, they've just reassessed my house, and I know that, you know, I saw some real estate comps and I think I'm overvalued by 30%. What do I do?
There are some, let's talk about the approaches that we will take to lower a home. First and the easiest and the most credible is doing an equity analysis. You take a look at all the different types of homes within your neighborhood that have the same classification that the assessor has placed on it, and see if they're paying more tax than you or less tax than you. And you want to show the assessing officials, I found 10 houses in my neighborhood that actually have a lower building per square foot, because the assessor breaks out your assessment, the land value and the building value. And we're always trying to lower that building value to say, hey, I'm paying more building assessment per square foot than my neighbor who has the same exact type of house. Lower my assessment because of that reason. So we'll do an analysis, submit those comps. That's one.
Now, I hear this, as you can imagine, that people will say, you know, I know the guy, and he's 2 streets over, and his house was built by the same builder as mine. I've been to his house. It's the same house I've got, and he's paying 15% less. What's going on?
There are a bunch of factors with that, though, and I get that question all the time. And I'll look it up and say, oh, no, you know what, he's paying the exact same as you are, but for, is he 65 or older?
And these are the exemptions.
She's
right?
smart.
You know, right, well, because these are
I hadn't thought about that, by the way.
These are the
I had a
questions
totally different answer. But
I actually, and I had a call from a client the other day. I worked on her house, and I know that she had a lower assessment, should have been happy with it. And you can actually go on, you can look at it on your tax bill. You could also go on the Cook County Treasurer's website and see, oh, what exemptions have you received in the past? What should have you received today in this tax bill? And you can see the history. And this woman didn't receive her senior citizen exemption, where she's received it in the past. Homeowners need to pay attention to those exemptions on your bill.
And Leonard, you said you were about to give a different answer. So
I was
what
going to say
would be your answer?
that your neighbor's square footage was larger. They've got a finished basement.
That was
or
my second
They've got
answer.
fireplaces. The comparables on the outside may not be the comparables what they are on the inside. But so we don't do a disservice to your listeners, Kevin, let me also point this out to you. This is important. You talked about, I get my tax bill, my neighbor's tax bill is lower. You use the word comp or comparisons.
Right. Comparable. Right.
And I don't want to take business away from my daughter and I or our firm, but the assessor historically, as far long ago as when Ed Kelly, Tom Hines was the assessor, they do this for the homeowner so that you don't really have to hire a lawyer. They do their own internal regression analysis, or they'll do, if you just give them your street address, they'll do internally at the assessor's office, they'll find comparable properties to see if you're assessed properly or not. My experience as having been the general counsel for the assessor's office was that, correct me if I'm wrong, she does it anyways, 6 out of 10 homeowners who go to the assessor's office on their own to get the assessor's help get a reduction. 4 out of 10 who hire lawyers get the reduction. Of course, the reduction might be a little bit higher, but the point being that the assessor of Cook County really cares about and should as an elected official, cares about making sure that the assessment is fair and equitable, and will for residential property owners, not commercial or industrial.
Yeah.
He'll actually let you come in, sign a piece of paper with your address, and do all the work for you and give you a result, and usually beneficially.
And now it's even easier because the assessor will actually send the application in the mail with the assessment notice, so you could just fill it out and mail it in. Or you actually get on the assessor's website, fill out the one page, and just hit send, and they'll do all the work for you and send you the results in the mail.
But something she said is very important.
So why would I hire you guys? If I can go on and
Well,
do that.
we explain that to our
Right.
clients to say.
First of all, we don't do houses. We only do houses for family and friends. Of course, we have 2,000 families and
for
friends.
friends.
But, we make our living as tax attorneys doing complicated commercial real estate, income-producing properties. But well, we didn't mention this, there are 2 million parcels of real estate in just Cook County, half of which are residential, and most of which are not filed against, or most of which aren't protested. So what happens is your assessment is increased this triennial, and the next triennial. At a point in time, it's so far out of a fair assessment that the assessor won't give you the direction where it should have been in the first place. She used the word aggressive. You got to be aggressive.
You do.
So let me ask you how that would happen. So especially if the assessor's office is using this regression algorithm, and theoretically they've fine-tuned that over the years so that it's a fairly accurate program, and I'm sure the input to that is comparables from the neighborhood. So how could it get so out of whack?
Because you don't protest it. Because you're doing, here, I'll give you an example.
Well, here, wait, let me answer that too, though.
It's okay, she could interrupt me. She's my oldest child.
But you have to say this, though. Let's say that house has a market value of $300,000. It's always had a market value of $300,000, and it goes up on the market. Even if the economy's bad, let's just say it was under market value, and somebody goes and buys it for $600,000. The assessor could easily put it up at that sale price, which is public record.
And should.
And should, because that's how
sure.
we appeal. That's a huge increase. So that's a justification as why they go up, because you bought it for that. You got to pay attention to what you're looking at when you're buying.
But with homes, you're not stuck with that purchase price like you would with an industrial facility. Even if you bought it for $600,000, if there's comparables in the neighborhood, they'll reduce it because of the comparables, won't they?
Not as much as they used to.
Well,
the
they
assessor,
should.
Then they should.
I
And
agree.
there are
They
other
should, but-
avenues. If that were the case, the assessor will say, I mean, they'll actually say in the result letters, due to a sale analysis, we have no change to your decision.
And that goes back. I'm sorry. That goes back to the base of what I just said. They'll use those comparables to have a fair and equitable assessment.
Right, and you could go to other avenues. 'Cause-
Even if you paid more for it than the assessment
should have,
says.
Right. And again, if the assessor disagrees with you, you have the right again to file at the Board of Review, which is the next level, the quasi-judicial second level. And then if the Board of Review, if you're not happy with that, you could be really aggressive and file a State of Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board case and try to get a partial refund for the taxes you have to pay, or file a lawsuit, which most homeowners don't do. But I want to
In
go.
fact, I wouldn't think that would be very successful.
You know, some do. And you know, when you have a $2 million home, and let's say you just recently refinanced, and you have an appraisal because of your refinance, you know, best indicator of market value is either your sales price or an appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, you know, it's the common question, did you refinance? Do you have an appraisal? What did the value come in at? And if the value came in at something that's worthwhile, the assessing officials may not go down to that appraisal value because it's out of line with the other homes in the neighborhood. They want to make everybody uniform, but you could file a lawsuit in court with that appraisal.
But I'm assuming that if you had that strong a case somewhere along this line, either at the assessor or at the Board of Review, that you would have gotten some relief.
Most of the times. Most of the times.
So what might trigger a lawsuit? And that's why I'm thinking
Oh,
that a
lawsuit.
lawsuit would be, I mean, litigation usually is a tough road to go down. But I mean, why would you think that you had a reason to prevail enough to go spend money on a lawsuit? You're going to spend more in legal fees than you would in
I used to work at the
recouped
state's
taxes,
attorney's
so-
office on the other side, handling all these specific objection lawsuits, that's what they're called. And for any type of property, if you have an appraisal or a recent purchase or a factual error, you could file a lawsuit in court. There are 15 state's attorneys in the real estate tax division working at the Daily Center, just in Cook County. With the how many would you say, 2 million?
Parcels.
2 million parcels of properties. Our firm alone has filed 400 a year of lawsuits to obtain partial refunds.
No homes.
No, these are all
No,
commercial
that's not
property,
true.
right?
That's not true. I would say 10% of
Mostly
my
not homes,
properties
right?
that I work on are homes that I've obtained appraisals to be aggressive. But again, I work on some areas in the city that are higher end where it may be worthwhile to tell my client, you know, maybe you should consider buying an appraisal because your residential 3-flat apartment or your home that they have valued at $2 million should only be $1 million. Then it's worthwhile to do.
Then you got the spread.
But again, now we're getting too complicated. But
Well,
there
I'm
are
sure
ways.
that there are some people watching the show who own income property, so
Yeah.
yeah, they need to know that, right?
But they're not going to file a specific objection lawsuit or a property tax appeal board matter. It's not going to get heard for 4 years on their own. They're going to have to get a lawyer.
Right, and they're going to have
It's
to
too
hire
complicated.
us.
Right. So if you're a commercial property owner and you've got some issues here, the best deal is to go talk to a law firm.
Oh,
And-
absolutely.
And lawyers, even though we don't do homes, and we do a lot of them because we have to because of family and friends, we do it on a contingency fee basis, percentage of the savings. If we don't save them any money, we don't bother. And if we don't think there's a case, and because we do it on a contingency fee basis, we'll tell the client you're fine. Now, something that Katherine mentioned, and I cut her off, is that your assessment might be right, but you're not taking advantage of all the exemptions you're entitled to. And I'd like to get into just one, only because they just wrote an article about it for the Bar Association.
Yeah, the senior citizens exemption is really what needs to be paid attention to right now because the
And how old
seniors
do you have
don't
to be
apply.
there?
65. There are two types of exemptions. There's a senior citizen exemption. You have to be 65 or older and own the property, automatic. But you have to apply for it every year. Then there's the senior citizen freeze, where if you're 65 and older, make a household income of less than $45,000, and you own and live there, you actually get your assessment frozen
But
for a period of years.
And the key word there is it's automatic. The senior citizens exemption, which my entire life was automatic, a couple of years ago, because of what happened in Springfield with caps on taxes, et cetera, they made it no longer automatic. So each year the senior, the person over 65, has to fill out the senior citizens exemption.
And the freeze, both.
The freeze too.
The freeze too, both.
What'll happen is they'll get their tax bill and say, well, my taxes went up, but the assessment stayed the same. You're not getting the exemption because you didn't fill out the form and you lost the exemption. $350 to as much as $600, $700, $800.
So you have to, well, do you get a reminder from the assessor's office or anywhere else
There's,
that
they
says
send out a
you need to do it?
booklet, but I don't know if a lot of people are getting the booklets. They should be. I know I've seen them, and they specifically say if you're a senior and you're entitled to it, you need to reapply. But again, you're dealing with senior citizens who've owned homes,
Well,
could be anywhere from
particularly-
65 to 95 years old.
And if it's been automatic for a long time, they just expect it to be renewed
Right.
and wouldn't necessarily renew it.
I got a call today from a lawyer who has a client who suffers from dementia. And she lives in a home, but she still has the residence, which is her primary residence, and for which she should be getting the homeowner's exemption. A woman in her 80s, say 90s, that's suffering from dementia, she's not going to know anything about that booklet. I'll be frank with you, I got my tax bill and I noticed I didn't get my senior citizens exemption. I went down to the next floor in my office in my building and I took one of the junior associates, Danny Lynch. I says, if the assessor thinks my house is worth this much, he could have it.
Yeah.
I had lost my exemption. I apparently got the booklet, didn't pay any attention to it. I have a daughter who's a tax lawyer, and I didn't pay attention to it. And then Katherine started at the show saying, you have to be aggressive. You got to pay attention.
And you got to look at the tax bill. A lot, the homeowner's exemption is supposed to, as we say, roll year to year, just automatic. If the property sells in that given year, they might lose the homeowner exemption. So you have to pay attention. Or maybe you never got it and never realized it, and you may have been entitled to it for years.
Can you go back? Yeah, suppose that happens. and
Absolutely, you can
you go back and collect all that tax for all those years you should have gotten the exemption? and get a
Absolutely, you can only
refund
go
for
back
all that?
3 years. 3 years. 3 years. So
Wanna make
right
sure
now,
she got that.
Yeah, no, 3 years. 3 years.
Yeah.
So right now, since we have the 2012 books or the tax bills, you can go back. 9 is iffy right now, but I would try to apply for 9, 10, and 11.
I mentioned to you that if you don't protest your assessment, this triennial, that triennial, that triennial, and you say, well, why can't you get it back to where it was? Rarely will the assessor's office invade a previous triennial. So if
Yeah.
you're 3 triennials over assessed, he'll only reduce it to the 1 triennial over
Just
assessed.
previous, that one, right?
And the reason is because you have to give that money back, and those taxing districts have asked for that money,
They've spent
got
it.
that money, and Proviso spent that money.
You bet.
So,
Which is another reason why I'm aggressive with my homes, because if the assessor proposed a decrease on a lot of the homes that I've been working on, they're not going to give me much more to get relief for the taxpayer. good for them. So if the tax rate goes up and they're already on a decrease, their taxes will probably remain the same, maybe a little bit higher. They're on a decrease, but I want to get them as low as possible.
Well, let me ask you a much different question, because I hear this being on the school board. People will come in and say, you know, it's that darn TIF district, because we're not able to collect the tax increment financing district. You know, and as you know, as our viewers may not know, that's commercial districts that will set aside the incremental tax finance. They'll use that to finance bonds and pay back the bonds with the incremental taxes that would have otherwise gone to a school district or a library. And so the homeowner will say, well, gee, the TIF is siphoning off all that money that would have gone to pay these levies from the various taxing bodies. So my taxes are going up, right? Because the levy is the levy, and the school board or the library board or the park district, they have to collect the money. So is there any appeal that homeowners have on TIFs? How does that work?
It comes out of the legislature, and the as you know, the mayor and the previous mayor and this mayor, they use that tax increment financing money to what they consider to be an important infrastructure change. Ultimately, it could be argued that that TIF money that's causing you to have your taxes go up because it's not being contributed to your tax burden, arguably, will ultimately cause your property to be more valuable because of the infrastructure improvements from the tax district, which is going to also, therefore, once they get through with the tax and their taxes are up, then they're going to be contributing to the tax base as well. You're going to be the winner in the long run. That has created a lot of development. So,
to people who, what's the average turnover on houses? It used to be about 7.5 years that people would stay in.
You know, with the commercial and residential real estate collapse over the last 8 years, I don't have any idea.
No.
That's all changed. Yeah.
Right.
No, I don't get, we used to get a lot of, I just recently purchased this home, I don't get that. I'm trying to sell my home, we end up moving, but the home's vacant now, for sale. Can you do anything about that? That's what we've been getting. You could file vacancy, but it's very difficult to get any type of vacancy relief from the assessor's office with the home, unless it's recent construction.
There is such a thing, though, as vacancy relief?
Yeah, and you
How does
usually
that
see
work?
that with more of like commercial industrial properties where there's tenants and the tenant leaves, the lease expires, tenant vacates, and the property, the landlord's listing the property, that unit for lease, and
Or it could be
it's
like
been it's been vacant for over a year. We can go in and ask for 1 year vacancy relief from the assessing officials, as long as we could show that there were efforts to lease or sell that property.
And so that's, I'm sure there's some complicated formula based on what kind of rent you used to get and what rent you forgot.
No,
Not really.
I'll give you an example. Why don't you go ahead?
No, you could go ahead.
Let's say you got a commercial property in Proviso Township. Let's say that it's vacant. Keeping in mind what Katherine said to start the show, every assessment is two assessments, land and improvement. Land values are impossible to get reduced. So when we reduce an assessment, it's usually we reduce the value of the improvement of the property. That property in Proviso, if the assessor has it valued at $100,000, the improvement, not the land, but the improvement, if it's vacant and boarded, he'll reduce it to 90%.
Right.
If it's just vacant, he'll reduce that assessment of the improvement by 80%. That's only for a 1 year period because it's a conditional status. You hope that it would be leased the following year.
And you'd have to reapply. If it were still a vacant next year, you'd have to reapply.
And the assessor, if you file vacancy at the assessor's office, you actually have to show what the income is. It's an affidavit that needs to be filled out. So if you're not collecting any rent, you're going to see zero, and you're still going to see all the expenses that are being paid, utilities, insurance, any type of repairs, taxes. So, but the assessor's office has a field check department, field check guys, they'll actually go out and verify that that property is in fact vacant, even though we're submitting vacancy documents. So because of that reason, you have to file every year because the vacancy will change. So next year it could be part vacant, or it could be finally leased. So,
you know, you also mentioned, does the assessor go out and actually put his hands on the property to assess it, value it? And the answer is no in Cook County. As we said, well, how does he get his values? And I'll just make this real quick. Every time a piece of property is sold in Illinois, you fill out what's called a green sheet, tax declaration form. That green sheet is triplicated. One goes to the assessor, one goes to the Department of Revenue to fix the equalizer, which we don't want to talk about. And the assessor will take all those green sheets
And we should tell our viewers that we don't want to talk about it just because it's so complicated. We just don't want to go down that road.
It's so complicated that I'll embarrass myself because I'll get confused. That's how complicated. Of course, I'm older too. But the assessor will take all those green sheets, so he's got actual values, and that's the basis of his regression analysis. So he does, in fact, have sales of comparable properties in the neighborhood over the last 3 years.
So this regression algorithm that they run is constantly being updated with new data,
Correct,
right?
correct.
Here's new comps in your neighborhood. So they can, so it's not just sort of a random assessment or assignment of value.
She worked there. I was general counsel for the assessor. I can honestly say they're not looking to gouge the property owners by charging them a lot of money on real estate taxes. They're only trying to do what constitutionally they're supposed to do, value a property, what in their opinion to sell for at the marketplace. Our job is to tell the assessor, to put it another way, our job is to make that silk purse a sow's ear.
So let's take the case where, let's say in a given area, Proviso, my township, let's say a whole bunch of people went out and got their property, they appealed, their appeals were all successful, and so there's some significant amount of money in Proviso that's now not being collected from those homeowners. Does that make everybody else's taxes go up? Because once again, the levies are what they are.
Yes.
So it's a zero sum. Your gain is, in a sense, my loss.
Right.
And that's why you read in the paper all the time the state attorney's office going after people that are getting homeowners exemption that don't live on their property, senior citizens exemption, they're not really 65. Well, gee, Len, how does that happen? I'll tell you how it happens. You'll buy a piece of property that's got an existing homeowner's exemption or senior citizens exemption. You don't tell the assessor, I'm under 65, I bought it, but it's still on there. And frankly, the assessor's office and the state attorney's office, they don't have the personnel to police that.
No, there isn't that many. But I do want to focus on the fact that when you have the homeowners have their tax bills in their hand, they need to look at those tax bills, make sure that they're receiving all their exemptions. Just to clarify, homeowners exemption rolls year to year, but if you didn't get it, you have the right to get it for this year and the last 3. There's also an exemption, a newer one called the long-term occupant exemption, which means that you own it, you've lived there for over 10 years, and you have a household income of less than $100,000. And that's a worthwhile exemption, and I don't think a lot of the homeowners know that that even exists.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of that one.
Yeah,
So.
and it's a larger exemption than just your
Of course,
basic
you probably
homeowner's
make
exemption.
over 100,000, so it doesn't apply to you.
Oh, it's millions.
Right, yeah.
Mostly
I
off this
assumed
show.
as much, yeah,
right,
right.
yes.
And plus the
The income from all the advertising that we get from this show, right?
Yeah, so, and if you didn't get them, you need to go to the assessor's office. There are 6 locations all around the county. Walk in with your driver's license, a closing statement, any proof to show that you've lived there for over 10 years.
Gas bills.
Gas bills. And fill out all the paperwork there. If it's early enough, they might actually give you an adjusted bill right now, and you could pay the lower amount.
I mean,
Or-
even just now that the tax bills are coming out, you can get it adjusted right now, get a reissued tax bill.
If you get all the documentation, you get into the assessor's office.
As soon as possible.
Before
Before
they
the deadline.
certify the A-roll.
Right, because the taxes are due August 1st. So
Right.
if you go in and, end of July, they may not be able to give you an adjusted bill.
But then you get the refund. It's called a certificate of error. You get a check the following
Right,
year.
and you don't want to go
Okay.
through that and stand in the lines, pay it in full, and then you could apply for that refund after the date is due, after August 1st.
So we got about 20 seconds left. What's the one piece of advice you want people to take away from this show?
Check your exemptions.
Be aggressive.
Be aggressive.
Be aggressive and check your exemptions. Can't think of a better way to wrap it up. Leonard, Katherine, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
I've
you.
learned a lot, so I think our viewers have as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can see us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19, or you can find us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So until next time, thank you and good night.